Alright, today we're going to do a rear struts on a 2003 Honda Civic EX. Not too bad of a job, just need some basic hand tools and stuff. That's probably not everything you need, but there's some of the tools you'll need. And then today we're going to be putting in Honda OEM struts. We're not putting aftermarket struts in today. You can, but a lot of times they will fail earlier than factory stuff does. This car has about 160,000 miles on it, so the original struts lasted pretty long. So I figure if we put original struts back in, they'll probably last the life of the car. If you're going to put aftermarket struts in, I recommend KYB. The other ones, probably not have very good luck on them. And there's the part numbers. If you do buy the OEM struts, they do not come with the lock washer. So you need the lock washer. That's the part number right there. And also, this is the rubber bump stop. A lot of times the rubber bump stops go bad on these. They'll break and stuff. It's a good idea to have one on hand just in case you need it. You don't necessarily have to have them, but if it's broke, you'll wish you had it. Alright, first thing I like to do is we'll come in. The struts are right here behind this cover, so you're going to have to get this cover off. And the easiest way to do it, just use a tool like this. Just come in, pop this out. If it pops out. Sometimes they're in there kind of tough. And then this piece is covering it, but you can get it. Just like that. And that'll loosen this up. Keep rolling. And then right here's another one. And one more right here. You don't have to get this one. I'm just going to pull the floor covering off. Makes it easier. And then there's three on the other side. And then this should come off. Boom. And then there's your strut right there. Alright, first thing I like to do before I jack the vehicle up is break these 14mm fasteners loose. You can see there's one here and there's one on the back side. This one in the middle holds the strut assembly together. Leave that one alone for now. Don't touch this. No, no, no. And just break them loose for now. Alright, we're just going to jack the vehicle up. The point I'm using right here, I'm using this right here to jack the vehicle up. And you're going to need a pretty tall jack if you're going to use that point, just so you know. And then we'll go ahead and put the jack stands under there. Do not work under a vehicle with only a jack. You need to put jack stands under here. Here's the point right there where the jack stands need to go. That's where you put them on Hondas. There's no pressure on that jack. The jack's just sitting there. Alright, we're going to take the wheels off. Most Hondas, including these, are 19mm lug nuts. I'm going to use an impact. If you don't have an impact, you need to break these loose when the vehicle's still touching the ground. And then here's your strut assembly right here. And you can see, can you get a shot in there? Mm-hmm. I don't know if you can tell, but you can tell that these look a little wet. And that's a good sign that they need to be replaced. And that's what we'll be doing today. We've got the front wheels chalked so the car doesn't roll. And we already broke the nuts up on top loose. Now we just got to get the bolt up underneath here loose. The bolt holding the strut. I'll show you where it is. Alright, that's the one we got to get loose. I'm just going to use my impact and a swivel to knock it off. That's probably as far as I'm going to get it. You can see sometimes these things are on there, so you might have a little trouble getting it out. Now you can see I got it as far as I can go. The nut on the other side is welded, by the way, so don't try to work on that, or actually you can't. Now this strut is keeping this bolt under tension. We're going to have to take the little bit of tension off the strut so we can get the bolt out. Alright, in order to get that loose, you got to pry this down. So you got to find a good area to pry. On the other side there's a little more room right here where you can pry on these bolts right here. We're going to do the same here, but we're going to have to use this instead of right here. I like to get on there, but I can't really with all this stuff in the way, and I ain't taking anything else off. So just put it right under that bolt right there, and rest it right on there. Get you a 2x4 like this and see how it allows you to wiggle it. You just need a little bit of wiggle room. You can reach right under here, push it down just a little bit, take your bolt out just like that. That's how it's done. If you don't take this, you can see right there, you don't take that pressure off, you're never going to get this bolt out. Now sometimes these bolts seize inside here, and if that's the case you might be in for a long day. Okay, now that we got the lower bolt out, and now we can just finish taking these off. I like to do the bolt in the back first. Harder to get to. Can you get a shot of where it is right there? And then we'll get this front one right here. And right now the strut won't fall out because it's under tension. We'll have to release that tension like we did when we got the bolt out, and then we can pop this out of here. So you can take both off and then they're good. Once again, leave this alone. Don't touch that. Alright, we're going to do the same trick with our piece of wood. We're just going to put it right on that nut right there, and now we can move it out of there, and boom, there goes your strut. We can just take it out right there. So that's what it looks like together. Now you're going to need a spring compressor to compress it. Now in this case we're going to use my Brannick spring compressor here. You can do it with just a regular spring compressor, but you just got to be careful because these things are under a lot of tension. In fact, I'll show you the other spring compressor that you can use. Now you can use spring compressors like this, and you just put it on there like that, one on each side, and then just tighten the nuts. Alright, actually on this set it's like this, so you might have to orientate it the other way around. You might have to do it like this so you can get a socket or an impact on there. But I'll be honest, you know, these kind of suck to use, so just be careful. Especially in this case, there is enough room. These coils aren't too tight. Some of the Hondas, especially the front struts, the coils are really small and you can't get these in there. So just be aware of it, that you have to compress this spring, and just compress it enough to get a little bit of daylight right here in between the spring and the strut. and then you can safely remove this nut. Don't remove this nut until you've compressed this spring and taken the tension off, because otherwise it can shoot off and kill you. Alright, we're just going to put this on the spring compressor. In this case, I already pretty much have it set up to do Honda struts. Remember, you just need to compress it enough just to get the tension off the bottom. Oops. And you can see right there, just started to come off. I'll move it a little more. You can see now the spring is pretty much compressed. Go a little bit further. Now you can see that the tension is off of it. That's about as far as you need to go. You don't really need to go any further. Now in this case, it's easier to get this nut off when there's a little bit of tension on there. So I'm going to put it back up just a hair, but not too much. And now this way I can get this off, because sometimes this shaft will spin on you and it makes it difficult to get off. In this case, I'm going to put a little bit of a PB blaster on here and let that soak in just for a second, and then we'll get this off. Most of these Honda struts come with an Allen head or a hex head on the top of the strut, which you'll need a 5mm hex head to unloosen it, and you'll also need some kind of wrench. In this case, I'm using a ratcheting wrench. Definitely makes it a lot easier. You just put that in there. Make sure you get it seated down pretty good, and then you should be able to just break it loose. Now that it's loose, I can put just a little more tension, or take a little more of this tension off the spring, and that way it's loose down here. And now I can take this nut completely off. It helps. It definitely helps loosen that and keep everything straight if you keep just a little bit of tension on there. Not much, just a tiny bit. In this case, I have a clamp that keeps that strut together so it won't come apart, and then I can take this off. You can definitely see where a ratcheting wrench helps a lot. And now that the spring is safely compressed, you can take the nut off. Always replace these nuts. And like I said, if you use factory Honda struts, it doesn't come with the nut. You need to order a nut with it. Alright, when I take the struts apart, I like to keep everything in order. And I keep it how it came. I just lay it down face up, same way it came. Now in this case, I can leave this assembly together, and I should just be able to take the strut straight out, and I can leave everything in place. That's what's nice about having this setup, is you can do that. And I can just take this piece off. Once again, I'll just keep it together, this piece and this piece. Sometimes it's tough. You might need to knock it just a little bit to get it off. And then you got your rubber bump stop that you can take off. Now in this case, I'm replacing them with brand new rubber bump stops. Here's the part right there, if you care to know about it. But sometimes they're messed up, sometimes they're not. And but if you get this far, it really sucks if you don't have the bump stop to replace it. Alright, so you can see the strut definitely seen better days. Good way to test it, you can just take it on a piece of wood, push down. That's really easy. And then as you can see, look at this one, doesn't even return. It should come back. It's not even doing anything. So this strut is definitely shot. Make sure you got the right parts before you try to put it all back together. As you can see, it looks identical. on the rear struts, and this is usually so at most Hondas. They're usually the same part number. The fronts have a left and a right, but usually the rears are the same. And then in this one we can definitely much stiffer, and you see how it returns right back. That's a sign of a good strut. Alright, so you can just take your strut, start putting everything back together. Bump stop goes with the small end down like that. And this piece with the little beveled edge goes down, sits right in that little seat right there. And then the washer. And now just remember, that needs to go right there. Just to go in the little notch. And then you put your washer on, and then a new nut. Alright, just get this stuff back in there, tighten your nut up. And I like to, once I get the nut on, put a little tension on here. Just make sure this goes back right in the seat there. Once you get some tension on there, it makes it easier to tighten this up without everything moving and floating around. You just get tightened down. If you really must know the torque spec, it's 22 foot-pounds. Just get it snug like that, you're golden. Alright, once you get the nut fully secured back on there, then you can relieve the pressure off this. And there you go, there's your strut assembly. And if you did everything correctly, it should still have that 21-degree offset, so that way it'll go into the car easy. Alright, it's a good idea if you got WD-40 or some kind of oil or something, you can, not a bad idea to oil those so it makes it easier when you put it in. Alright, once you get the strut assembly all put back together like this, if you kept the alignment the same like I did on the machine, then all the angles should be correct, because this piece goes to the inside of the car, and usually they're either marked with a dot or a hole. In this case it's a dot, and that goes to the inside of the car. And if you look, this is perpendicular right here, and if you look, I'm going to get a camera shot straight down. The angle of these bolts are about 21 degrees. So if you did everything correctly, they should still be at about 21 degrees. And in this case, the rubber O-ring stayed up in the car right there. So if that did, just make sure you can clean it up and put it back on the strut like that before you put it back up in the car. Alright, this is the other side of the car. This is the right side of the car. So this is the strut already completed, ready to go back in the car. You can see, same thing, this goes to the inside, and the dot or the hole goes to the inside. And if you look, it's the exact opposite of the left side. The 21-degree angle is like this. So just make sure you get your angles correct when you compress the spring and put everything together. If not, once you get it in the car, you're going to have to twist the bottom in order to get it to go to align right, and it's not fun. So just make sure you get it lined up correctly first before, and then you won't have to fight with it. Alright, now many times when you're trying to take this bottom bolt out of the bottom of the car, if you live in a rust belt area, you'll realize right away, it might be why you're watching this video, that it's tough to get these bolts out. They sit right in this bushing like that, and it usually does not get seized up right here on the threads. It's usually getting seized up right in here on the inside of this bushing. And so if when that happens, you're in for a fight. You can try hammering it with an impact, or you can try just hammering it. You can tap all around, especially if you're going to replace a strut. You can tap around here. Just tap. You don't have to crush it. Tap with a hammer on the end here and hammer it, and put lots of, just douse this thing with PB Blaster or some kind of penetrating oil, and especially try to get it down right in here. I'm not so concerned about the threads over here, but right on the inside here and right on the inside here, you might want to spray as much as you can. Maybe leave it overnight. Maybe spray it, impact it for a while, leave it overnight, spray it, impact it for a while. It might take quite a while to get these bolts off. And especially hammering it or impacting it with a wrench. And if none of that works, you can try heat right on the end of the bolt. I don't recommend heating this side because that nut is welded and you don't want to screw that up. Then you'll have to replace a lot of stuff or do a bunch of welding. So if you want, you can try heating this end up, and hopefully it'll transfer enough heat through here to loosen that bond. Then maybe hit it with some more impact wrench or a hammer or something to break it loose. So it's tough when that seizes up in there, and you're just going to have to fight with it until you can get it out. You really want to try to avoid cutting it. You know, you might have to take a Sawzall and cut in there and cut everything off, or a cutting wheel, but it's a bitch if you have to do that, and you're going to be probably an all-day job just getting these bolts out. So just take your time and work at it, and you can probably get it loose without having to take drastic measures. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and put the strut back in. Like I said, if this, sometimes it gets stuck under there. If it does, pull it off, and then the little raised edge, beveled edge should go to the top. Just get it put back in there. And just fish the strut back up under. Just keep your markers to the inside of the car. Just fish the strut back up in there. Just get it caught up into the assembly, and then the bolts, you can go around top. The bolts, you can go around top. The bolts should, as you can see, the bolts are through. We can just put the nuts on. There, and now the strut is secured. Now it won't fall out. Alright, I'm going to do the same trick. I'm just going to put my wood under there, and then right on this bolt, so I can push down a little bit so I can get this bolt in. Might have to wiggle it a little bit, but there, the threads are caught. Now I just need to tighten that bolt a little bit to get the threads through into this nut on this side. And that way I can raise the suspension a little bit and then tighten it down to the final torque. Alright, I got my impact dialed down. I'm just going to snug this up a little bit. I'm not going to crank on it, just going to snug it. There, pretty close. Now we can, what we're going to do is we'll put the jack right here and raise the suspension up, put load on the suspension, and then we'll torque it. And these are, this bolt is 45 foot-pounds, and the ones up on top are 43 foot-pounds. Alright, so we're just going to raise up the suspension or put load on the suspension. Honda recommends that you put a load on the suspension before you do your final torque on these bolts. You can put the tire on there and lower the vehicle down and do it that way. I found it's easier just to put a jack under here and raise it that way. Don't put it under here, put it under the control arm. And just raise it up until it just starts to come off the jack stands, just like that. just barely off the jack stands. Now we're good. Leave it in place, leave your jack stand in place, and do your final torquing. Alright, we just get the torque wrench, get it on the nut or the bolt head here, and just torque it down. There we go. All right, now that the suspension is under load, you can just run these down by hand. And usually just take a normal socket, just snug them up. A little tight back in this back one, but you can get to it. Just tighten it up. Then put your torque wrench on here. Get it to the proper torque. Just like that. Remember, 43. Alright, now that you got all your fasteners properly torqued, now you can take the tension off the suspension. There you go. Your strut is now installed. Just before you button everything up, it's a good idea. Look over your work, make sure you got everything in and installed correctly and properly. Alright, let's go ahead and put your wheel back on. Just want to make sure you get it centered on that hub right there. If you have a hub cap, make sure this little knockout goes where the valve is. And start your lug nuts by hand so you don't cross thread them or strip them out. And then I'm going to run these down with a torque stick. You can see that that is a 80 foot-pound torque stick. It's specially made just to do this. Alright, we're just going to raise the vehicle back up in the same spot that we did before. Just enough to get it off the jack stand. Make sure you pull them both out safely. And then make sure nothing else is under the vehicle, including yourself. And then safely lower it back down. And now that the vehicle is lowered back down, we can get in here and button all this stuff up. Alright, with a fresh clean pair of gloves so I don't get the interior all dirty, we just go and just put these back in place. Both sides. And then put your clips back in. Let's see. That one goes there. This one goes there. And then we'll put the two on the inside. And if you took your trunk liner out, you can set that back into place, and then just go inside the vehicle here and pin them down. Alright, just get your trim back into place properly where it belongs. Line up the hole and you can put your fastener in there, and just do the same for the other side, and then that buttons it up. It's all good. Double check your work, make sure everything's back in place. Alright, and don't forget to remove the chocks on your wheels. And then just to check, let's go ahead and check and see how close to 80 foot-pounds that torque stick was. Yeah, pretty good. Almost right on. Not bad. And a little more. Right on. Yeah, that's pretty darn close. And one more tip. Don't forget to set your torque wrench back to 0 after you use it. When you store it, these things should be set at 0. Alright, there you go. That's how you do the rear struts, or at least that's how I do rear struts on a Honda Civic. Many of the Hondas, especially the rear ones, they're very similar. So if you learn how to do it on one, you can do it on many different models. So if this video helped you, make sure to like it and give it the thumbs up. Thank you for watching.